In this presentation, I decided to connect chapters 2, 4, and 5, which express implications dealing with black trash, black invisibility, and the concepts of guilt and shame and their involvement to the discussion of race. In chapter 2, Mills begins his argument by stating that for centuries, blacks themselves have been thought of as disposable in the body politic and thus part of the problem. Because of this, Mills argues that there is an invisible racial contract that is constructed. This contract can be defined as an agreement among the population to establish white persons as superior. One of its purposes is to conceptualize racial domination. In other words, white supremacy is established. This racial contract, according to Mills, puts domination front and center. The chapter proves its title of Black Trash when Mills emphasizes that simply purging blacks of their body politic is respectable. Overall, this chapter would generalize that blacks are the most isolated population in U.S. history. Chapter 4 focuses on the invisibility, which becomes synonymous with the over-visibility of blacks. Generally speaking, to be black is to be invisible. They are not seen as a source of knowledge. Gordon emphasizes the idea of absence when he supports the claim made by Fanon that says that the black body lives in an anti-black world as a form of absence of human presence. As repeated in various chapters, Gordon re-emphasizes the fact that in a white world, the man of color encounters difficulties in the assimilation of his bodily framework. A good example of this is seen in the chapter's reference to Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. In this piece, he writes, "I am an invisible man. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me." Overall, it seems that individuals, especially whites, consider their own opinions and perspectives to be dominant. This connects to Mills' work because since people view blacks as an invisible or over-visible race, it might lead to the mentality discussed in Chapter 2, the idea of expressing harmful and degrading attitudes towards blacks. Lastly, in Chapter 5, Hagerty demonstrates the dichotomy between guilt and shame and their regards to race. Hagerty aims to advance our understandings of aspects of mainstream white moral psychology. He suggests that along with guilt and shame comes a sense of responsibility. In a general term, guilt is the focus of a negative evaluation of an act done. Those who experience guilt fear punishment and desire to be free of blame. On the other hand, shame is the focus of oneself. Those who feel shame fear being seen in a light they don't want to be seen in. They fear abandonment and they desire to be forgiven. In regards to race, white guilt is a fearful response of black power. In a liberal sense, white Americans can avoid this ethical guilt by claiming that if they are not personally or directly doing anything to cause harm, then they are not responsible. In other words, white guilt reproduces moral psychologies by making it almost impossible for white people to feel guilt for race problems. This discussion of responsibility, of shame, and guilt can then be connected to the previous two chapters in the way that this might be inferring that since white people have the option to avoid any racial responsibility, then it might just justify the acts and behaviors and thoughts we have. All three chapters have achieved the goal of portraying whites as ultimately superior and blacks as ultimately inferior.